To know in 6 minutes starts now.
Hurricane Michael is getting stronger. I'm Dave Anthony, Fox News.
I think it's going to be pretty bad.
It's just been upgraded to a Category 2 with 100-mile-an-hour sustained winds. Could be a Cat 3 when it hits tomorrow.
Well, I will go by the store today and pick up some water and some food, and packed goods, batteries.
She's getting ready in the Florida Panhandle. Fox meteorologist Janice Dean says Michael could dump a foot of rain in parts of that area.
The storm surge could be catastrophic here. 8 to 12-foot storm surge along the Big Bend.
And areas of Alabama and Georgia will also get the hurricane as it moves inland. Then
we're going to be dealing with tropical storm force conditions across the Carolinas, areas that were devastated by Hurricane Florence.
Brett Kavanaugh takes his seat on the Supreme Court this morning, ready to hear his first cases.
I was not appointed to serve one party or one interest, but to serve one nation.
Kavanaugh also said at a ceremonial swearing in he's not bitter about the nasty confirmation fight. Fox's Rachel Sutherland live in Washington.
Dave, President Trump watched over the swearing-in at the White House last night and said those who step forward to serve the nation deserve a fair and dignified evaluation.
On behalf of our nation, I want to apologize to Brett and the entire Kavanaugh family for the terrible pain and suffering you have been forced to endure.
The retired Justice Anthony Kennedy administered the oath as Justice Kavanaugh's wife and daughters looked on in the East Room. Dave.
And Rachel, Democrats hope their anti-Kavanaugh campaign could help them win back control of Congress. A vigil last night in Amsterdam, New York. More than 1,000 people paying respects for the 20 killed in a limo crash Saturday. The investigation has already found that limousine failed a recent inspection, and the driver, who's among the dead, did not have the right license to drive that limo. 2 convicts who broke out of a Kentucky jail Saturday night are back in custody. One was captured after crashing his car during a chase. They had escaped, hiding in trash cans put outside to be picked up. This is Fox News.
How can a fully stocked restroom improve your image? How can serviced fire extinguishers or first aid cabinet make your employees more prepared? How can comfortable work apparel make your business more productive? For over 1 million customers, the answer is simple. Cintas. Cintas delivers everything you need to open your doors with confidence. Because helping keep businesses well-equipped, clean, and looking their best, that's our business.
Oh, I'm ready!
Get Cintas and get ready for the workday.
When it's too cold for camping, we go camping. When it's too hot to work, we work. The John Deere Gator XUV 835 comes with game-changing heat and AC and 3 wide seating, so it's never too anything for anything. Nothing runs like the strong. And nothing runs like a Deere. Visit your John Deere dealer to test drive today. Get $400 off the Gator XUV 835M at participating John Deere dealers now through October 26, 2018. See your dealer for details.
Paid sick leave is guaranteed for nearly every person employed in New Jersey when a new law takes effect October 29th. Labor attorney Adam Gersh says most employers will have to make a change to their current paid time off policies.
There are many workers that don't get paid time off currently. A lot of servers in restaurants and part-time workers, and this will apply to them as well.
The law also permits victims of domestic violence to use their leave for treatment and counseling. We may finally get to see the long-promised audit of New Jersey Transit today. Governor Murphy has an event later where it's expected he'll reveal his administration's evaluation of the dysfunctional agency he once called a national disgrace. Grief counselors will be at the Katina Elementary School in Freehold this morning after the school's principal died over the weekend. At just 46, it's not clear how Jeffrey Huguenin died. The district issued just a brief statement. Michael has gained new strength from warm tropical waters, forecast to quickly intensify into a major hurricane before landfall on Florida's Gulf Coast. The storm could bring rain and wind to New Jersey Thursday and Friday. I'm Eric Scott. This is the Town Square News Network.
We should finally see some brighter, warmer weather today, although fog, mist, and drizzle may continue for much of the morning. Then we'll get peaks of sunshine through this afternoon. High temperatures today, upper 70s, maybe 80 degrees somewhere in South Jersey. Partly cloudy tonight with fog likely. Lows only fall to the upper 60s. Still warm and humid tomorrow. Highs around 80 with a mix of sun and clouds. And then rain moves in on Thursday, associated with now Hurricane Michael. That rain could be heavy at times. Bit of a gusty wind on Thursday. Highs still near 80. I'm Chief Meteorologist Dan Zarrow on WPG Talk Radio 104.1.
From Harry Hurley Way in the world's playground to the broadcast pioneers of Philadelphia Hall of Fame.
I want to congratulate my friend, Harry Hurley.
You're about to find out why Harry Hurley has been named to the Talkers magazine list of the 100 most important talk show hosts in the nation. Live from the studios of Town Square Media in Northfield, it's Hurley in the Morning on WPG Talk Radio 104.1.
Hey, thanks very much. 5 minutes past the hour. Chuck Malamut is here, and this is a weekly program that we have done for 27 years. It is all about your financial matters, presented, sponsored by Chuck Malamut, a financial advisor. He leads his team, the Malamut Group, at Morgan Stanley's Northfield, New Jersey office. Chuck is the exclusive financial advisor for the Hurley in the Morning program. The following program is sponsored by Chuck Malamut, a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. I referred to a very important person from Morgan Stanley. Chuck, I left you a little homework there for you to take a look at. That's your chief person in your company in that regard. I found that incredibly insightful and very interesting. The information, views, and opinions that you're about to hear are those of Chuck, do not necessarily reflect those of Morgan Stanley or its affiliates. They are current as of the date of this broadcast, subject to change without notice. Neither the information provided nor any opinion expressed herein constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. This presentation is for informational purposes only. Morgan Stanley Smith Barney, member SIPC. Although we do not take phone calls during this hour, I want to let our listeners know that there is a major carrier failure at the moment. So our phone lines have not been working all throughout the morning, and we'll let you know. Our chief engineer, Tom McNally, is on it, but he's the most talented guy I know at what he does, but it's not even at his level. Our equipment is fine. It is a service carrier major failure is what I understand. Chuck, you have a list that's more than an hour long, but I added one to it, and I'm going to ask you before you do your market update. Morgan Stanley, belief in American exceptionalism among global investors has never been higher, and this is your major person, Rishar Sharma, who is the chief of his areas of responsibility at Morgan Stanley. I love the term American exceptionalism, and it's one thing if we as Americans believe in it, but among global investors, this concept has never been considered higher. I think that's a big deal.
Good morning, Harry.
Hey.
It's been no secret that and we've talked about it before, how important America has been for the rest of the world, so to speak. It's we've had exceptional returns up until the last week or so within the equity markets. S&P, Dow Jones, NASDAQ up anywhere from 9 to almost 14%. Comparing that to, for instance, the Chinese stock market, which was closed for a week and reopened, sort of caught up yesterday. It was down about 3.7%, but year to date down about 20%. So there's been a lot of movement, out of these foreign countries back into the U.S. as our economy has continued to be somewhat vibrant. We're not. Let me phrase that: vibrant on a comparative basis, and it's probably the best economy that you and I and Kirk have probably ever lived through, and all of your listeners. I mean, it's just amazing that when you look at what's happening, with the stock market. I mean, the Fed came in; it was expected that they would move the 25 basis points. Shortly thereafter, employment numbers came. They were, and we'll talk about this in a minute. I think they were pretty stellar. The fact of the matter is that it's all around wage growth now, and what does that wage growth number look like? And if wage growth is too high, does it then set us back? Do we then end up? And again, the word recession. I've heard recession more in the last week than I've heard probably on a combined basis for the entire year. And then ultimately, what happens is the 10-year, which was pretty much hanging around 3%. The most amazing thing happened in a matter, it seemed like minutes. And I don't know, Kirk, if you were watching or Harry, you're watching, but the 10-year moves 18 basis points almost instantly. I mean, I thought, sometimes when you look at the screen and you say, well, it's sort of a misprint and it corrects itself. And then I turned around and it was not a bad quote. We went from literally 3% to 3.18 in a matter of no time.
Wow.
Now, to pile on top of that, the fact of the matter is bond markets were closed yesterday because of Columbus Day, catching up a little bit now right now at about 3.24, 3.25. It's the highest levels we've been since 2011. So the market, as a result of that, you think about, well, what's 18, what's 20, what's 25 basis points in the grand scheme of things is, I don't think it's a lot. But, a lot of the pundits are saying, okay, we're going right to 4. We're going to 4.5. And then you have that struggle, tug of war, we'll call it, between the Fed, the president, and everyone else. And then your philosophy with respect to when Fed increases rates and how often and in what magnitude.
Always been true.
There's a meeting in the beginning of November. There's no indication that the rates will move then. There's an indication that rates could very well move in December, and then there's probably anywhere from 2 to 3 rate hikes in 2019.
Well, that's my experience. The Fed typically sticks it to a Republican president in the year before the election.
So what happens is, but I think now some of the economic data that's coming back, and this all kind of revolves around third quarter as we're starting to see. I think we've only had Pepsi is really the only major company that's come so far. The big banks come this week and the end of this week with their earnings. There's indications, flat to somewhat positive. So, what Mike and I always talk about is the fact that, we need to work through, all the noise and then really focus on fundamentals, which the market, is really paying attention to. So, the fact of the matter is that we made such a big move this year, especially in technology, for instance, that there's nothing wrong with a pullback. I mean, we had a pullback in January.
Did you hear Kirk and I talk about the Wharton School finance professor?
I did, yeah, Jeremy Siegel. I mean, he's probably one of the, he's like a permanent bull. He's so, I've been doing this, for 32 years, and I've never, ever heard him become, being negative.
That's what I'm saying.
And I don't think he's terribly negative. I think he's a realist.
Well, let me see what you think of this, because now you have the chance to respond to it. Kirk had his say, and I had mine, and we both agree that the reason that I brought this to Kirk's show today, and I appreciate you letting me pose this question to you, Chuck, because you have a long list that I'm taking from your time now to do this, but I think this is really important because this guy is not a bomb thrower. He really is a solid guy. Wharton School finance professor Jeremy Siegel, one of the few in his field that I follow and trust. He says that he believes that the seemingly endless series of good news for the bull stock market has come to an end and that investors face a wall of worry because of surging interest rates. Exactly what the only guy on the panel that has no degree in this subject to speak on it has been saying. These interest rate increases have been really, this, Chuck, they've been bothering me every time more than the one before it. He calls them a major impediment for the fourth quarter. He says it's psychology. Quote, look at all the potential negatives. He cites the $800 billion U.S. government deficit. He cites the Federal Reserve selling Treasury bonds as it unwinds its balance sheet. He adds into it a little dose of the lingering U.S.-China trade tariff stuff, and that the Chinese have not been buying treasuries. And he says this is the sort of psychology that creeps into decisions that are going on and that it makes this quarter a difficult one. Your thoughts?
Well, I think it's painfully obvious as to what's happened since the middle of last week, where everything that we talked about in advance of the comments posted by Jeremy Siegel is the fact that the market might have gotten a little bit ahead of itself. Maybe sort of got over its skis, the front of its skis a little bit. You think about it was just last week that the Dow hit an all-time high, and then almost instantly, we were faced with somewhat of a sell-off. So
almost instantly, and what was the causation?
I think it was they looked at the jobs report. They looked at
the jobs report was beautiful. Remember that it started with I really committed a lot of this to memory for this morning's show. It started with the Fed chair actually saying that this is an economy that's almost too good to be true.
Yeah, I mean sometimes
I never heard of Fed chair.
Comments like that are taken maybe completely out of context.
As he jammed 25 more basis points right in there.
Look, the economy.
That's the causation.
The economy is good. I mean, and it doesn't take much to figure out that and we've talked about this, and you see it everywhere. There's more jobs than people.
Yeah. Well, if we're going to be precise, the economy is great.
So now, as a result of that, it's like this. Think about this. This stock market has literally been on an upward bias on a long-term basis since 2009. And within that, and I think we talked about this last week, we've had multiple corrections of 5%. We've had a few corrections of 10%.
You know what I think would have been a beautiful thing, Chuck? The Fed should not have done the 25 basis point increase. They should have just let this go for a bit and monitor. I think the last rate increase, it didn't break the camel's back because the economy is still great, but that was the causation to what happened.
Well, I think, the one thing, we'll talk about this in a minute, even though trade tensions have eased somewhat, there's still a lot of discussion around, what is the cost to a consumer, to buy goods and services. And I kind of, I didn't chuckle, but I was kind of amazed at what you had to say about the price of at the pump in the futures in the 6 o'clock hour. I say, wait,
that was the carbon tax.
I'm sitting there. I'm trying to do the math in my head. I said, well, this doesn't really sound right. I said, do I have too many zeros, or do I have not enough zeros?
That's how I was.
But I said, well, look,
5,000 a gallon. What could go wrong?
I think the good news is for all of us,
we're not going to be here at 2,100.
No, I think it's not going to be. We're not going to have to worry about that. I think maybe future generations will have that problem.
Let's get our first break in. You're listening to Chuck Malamut. Phone lines are down. It is Hurley in the Morning on WPG every Tuesday morning in the 8 o'clock hour. For the past 27 years, we visit with Chuck Malamut, the exclusive financial advisor for the Hurley in the Morning program. Chuck leads his team, the Malamut Group, at Morgan Stanley's Northfield, New Jersey office for all of your financial planning needs. Turn to Chuck, 609-383-2010. That's 609-383-2010. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Harry Hurley, WPG Talk Radio 104.1, South Jersey's talk station.
The Auto Plaza at English Creek. Roll with Mr. Tire.
This is Harry Hurley, and I'm with the Mayor, Charles Kane, owner and operator of the Auto Plaza Egg Harbor Township. Mayor, tell your listeners who are looking for a car, why should they choose the Auto Plaza?
Harry, it's our full-service department, selection, and hassle-free financing alternatives that have set us apart for over 17 years. Over the years, we've been the recipient of many sales and service awards, as well as receiving an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau. It's been a real honor for us. We are now serving a second generation of sales and service customers. Stop in today. You're going to love our staff and experience what makes us different.
For all of your automobile service, parts, and sales needs, call the Auto Plaza at 609-646-2447. That's 609-646-2447. And visit us on the World Wide Web at myautoplaza.com.
The Auto Plaza at English Creek. Roll with Mr. Tire.
Paul D'Amato.
Harry Hurley.
Paul, I know our listeners want to know what's new with the D'Amato Law Firm.
Things are great, Harry. We are so privileged to represent our clients whose lives have been turned upside down because they were involved in a serious accident. We meet on a regular basis. We copy our clients on all our correspondence so they always know what's going on with their case. We try to treat them like family. We have Alexa here, my daughter. I'm so happy that she's here. We have Steve Van Natten and Casey Gifford. We're a great legal team.
They're the D'Amato Law Firm for all of your personal injury legal needs. Turn to the official lead counsel to the Hurley in the Morning program for more than a quarter of a century. The D'Amato Law Firm in Egg Harbor Township, 609-926-3300. That's 609-926-3300. Tell Paul, Alexa, Sandy, the entire team that Hurley in the Morning sent you.
This flu season, one Walgreens flu shot can make a world of difference. So you can protect yourself and also your close-talking coworkers, high-fiving neighbors, 2-month-old niece. That's why Walgreens has specially trained pharmacists that have provided over 60 million flu shots since 2010. Stop by for your flu shot today with a $0 copay with most insurance. Because protecting the world starts with protecting yours. Walgreens. Trusted since 1901. Vaccine subject to availability. State, age, and health-related restrictions may apply.
Hi, it's Joe Pags. Thank you for listening to South Jersey's talk station, WPG, Talk Radio 104.1.
20 minutes past the hour. Chuck Malamut is here. All about your financial matters with Chuck Malamut continues. September jobs report, Chuck?
Well, Harry, let's take a step back because we really didn't. You know,
that's right. I jackpotted your.
We had we had a lot of action at the end of last week, but all in all, you know, the S&P was down about 1%. You would have thought with everything that happened, you know, latter part of the week that the market would have performed a lot worse. But remember, the beginning of the week with the announcement of U.S. and Canada with trade, I mean that didn't influence the market in a positive way. So we have had 2 consecutive down weeks in the S&P. It's been a long time since that happened. Areas that were hit the hardest were small caps, emerging markets that we've talked about previously, consumer discretionary stocks. And think about it, you know, if the consumer has less to spend, then they can't, you know, they can't buy, so to speak. Technology, we've talked about movement of money from large cap growth into large cap value hopefully as this rally continues. And communication services, meantime, defensive stocks like utilities, you know, they were the best performer last week. And again, the 10-year Treasury moved very, very quickly to 3.23%. Now, like I said, the market was closed yesterday for a bank holiday. The market is now open. The 10-year, I think, went to 323, 324, 325, and the S&P futures. And we don't like to talk about anything, or Dow futures. We don't like to talk about anything, you know, that's happening, you know, the day today. But the market is reacting in a negative way as these rates move higher because the thought process is that higher rates cut into earnings and ultimately cut into the stock market. Now, job report. If you take a look at first glance, the number didn't look terribly great. You know, it was 134,000 payroll gains during the month of September. That was lower than consensus estimates, but there was a very, very large revision for the month of August. If my memory serves me correctly, it was like an 80,000 plus.
Yes, sir.
During August. Now, you know, 50-year low with unemployment with 3.7%. Average hourly earnings did remain somewhat firm on a comparative basis, and that to us is really important at this point in time. And the fact of the matter, you know, we did have a hurricane, which, you know, was somewhat of a disruptive force, but that number I don't think is actually worked in, or no one really understands what the impact was. But 134,000 is still not a bad print, looking at what's happened for the last 6 to 9 months prior to that.
And it lowered the unemployment rate to 3.7%.
That is just amazing. And, you know, if you ever hear someone say, well, I can't get a job, I scratch my head and say, well, do you want to get a job? It might not be the job of your liking. And oftentimes say to young college graduates, you know, your first job's not your last job. And you look at the mobility of that generation, I mean, they don't hold jobs too terribly long. I mean, you think about it,
it's true.
You know, you've been doing this as long as you've been doing it. You know, Kirk's been in his business for a long time. We've been this.
It's unusual, people like us.
Yeah, so
it's not that way anymore.
The fact of the matter is that, you look at a 30 or 35-year-old today, Harry, they might have had anywhere from 5 to 7 jobs over a 10-year time span.
Kirk did put the video business out of business, though, but that's another story, Kirk.
We'll talk about that later. Yeah, that's okay.
That wasn't his fault, though.
Well, that's called change.
Yes, there's only one Blockbuster left in America. It's in Alaska, and it's hugely popular. It is exactly that. It's change. It went from VHS, from Betamax to VHS. Betamax could have won. They blinked. It was like sort of Coke and Pepsi. Betamax, VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, and then of course Redbox and things like that just put the little boutique operator out.
Kirk is still standing. It's all good. So.
I'm going to tell you why I miss it, because for me it was a social experience. I used to love. I lived in EHT, so Kirk knows that Susan was my Orbit Video was my store. I used to love going in for the new releases and go around and you talk to different people, you see people, hoping the video you want is in. It was all a social experience.
I run into people every week.
Yeah.
Say, I miss your store.
Yeah, it's true.
Harry, you had way too much free time back then.
You mean just to watch one movie every once in a while, like on a Friday night into the weekend?
Yeah,
too much time.
I think so. Yeah.
Now you know why Chuck was so hard to work with in the casino industry. He's just a taskmaster. Trade tensions.
All right, so as you know, it was last week. U.S., Canada, and Mexico. We're now on board. We have the New Deal, which is not substantially different than NAFTA, but the fact that you have Canada on board is a good sign. But those that benefited were U.S. automakers and dairy farmers. So the negotiations with China still are obviously significant in that final days as we get through this trade dispute. And the fact of the matter is, if it, is this a trade war? Is this political rhetoric? Is this trade tensions? I mean, it'd be so nice if we can kind of fast forward 6 months to really figure out, where we are.
Well, why isn't past prologue? Because this is trade. I'll tell you what it is. It's not any of that. It's trade negotiations. The president, as a candidate, campaigned that we have bad trade deals.
Well, we do.
And we do. And look, we had the 300% dairy tariffs from Canada, and a lot of smack talk coming out of Canada that they weren't going to be at the table for the new, what the president calls the USMCA. And guess what? He got that done.
I think it was actually, we were all kind of surprised. We woke up, I think it was Monday morning.
I'm not surprised.
To the news, because it was all done.
And all of a sudden, Canada was in it because they had to be.
Well, yeah, but so the key is, I think that what it gets down to is what is the ultimate cost to the consumer going to be? If this actually is a quote a trade war.
I don't like cliches, but let me use one: short-term pain, long-term gain. That's what this is.
I don't disagree with you, but remember that the market oftentimes looks through a very, very fine microscope when it comes to the markets, and
right, it won't like what's going on right now, but it will love it
and the market has a tendency to overshoot sometimes.
Yeah.
So don't be at all surprised if that does in fact happen. And while there's been no discussion of quote trade of late, it's all been focused on the 10-year Treasury. I think there is still some underlying issues that need a resolution, hopefully sooner than later.
Chuck, this did come up. Sometimes we just, it's organic in the nature of conversations we have on other things. It leads into other questions. Is there anything more about the future of interest rates?
Well, look, so what happened was they dropped that word accommodative, in the most recent statement. And Chairman Powell said he's going to try to, offset the strength that we have here in our economy with tighter monetary policy. Now, you guys talked about this last hour somewhat at length. Powell also indicated that the Fed may raise rates, quote, past neutral, which implies that additional hikes are on the horizon, which may have rattled the markets. I think it actually did rattle the markets, and as a result of that, do we go in December? There's a lot of pundits, Harry, saying it's not going to happen. They're not going to have this rate increase in December. And if economic data starts to show up and it's and it's not as strong as we've been accustomed to, then maybe the Fed kind of takes a step backwards. I think that kind of it's counterintuitive thinking with your thoughts with respect to what happens, after the midterms on the way to the next presidential election. But I guess only time will tell where we go with that.
Past this prologue, though, without a doubt. Well, let's get our bottom of the hour break in right now. We'll come back, one more power segment with Chuck Malamut. Straight ahead, Chuck Malamut, the official, the exclusive financial advisor for the Hurley in the Morning program. Best in the business, in my view. He leads the Malamut Group at Morgan Stanley's Northfield, New Jersey office for all of your financial planning needs. That's everything. That's retirement planning, college building, vacation planning, any type of financial mile marker that you're looking to plan for. Turn to Chuck. Sit down, and he'll go over all of your situations with you. 609-383-2010, 609-383-2010.
Hurley in the Morning. WPG Talk Radio 104.1.
Health Update with Robin Stoloff, brought to you by Atlanticare, a member of Geisinger.
As reports of sexual harassment by men in powerful positions continue to make headlines, more women are beginning to speak out. However, it's estimated that 1 in 3 women have been sexually harassed, and the majority of them do not report it. And it's not hard to understand why. Many victims fear they will be blamed, nothing will be done, or that they'll face retaliation, including losing their job. Hopefully, more businesses will offer training and education about workplace harassment and create a safe work environment that discourages this behavior. As victims of sexual harassment and abuse come forward and more harassers face consequences, we should feel empowered to speak out and stand up against it. If you need help, contact the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE. I'm Robin Stoloff for Health Update.
Health Update with Robin Stoloff, brought to you by Atlanticare, a member of Geisinger. Call 1-888-569-1000 or visit atlanticare.org. The Terraces at Seacrest Village is looking to expand their quality healthcare community. Attend the Seacrest Village Job Fair this Wednesday, October 10th from 8 till 5. The Terraces at Seacrest Village prides themselves on their staff. Apply for nursing, dietary, activities, housekeeping, and maintenance. They offer excellent rates and benefits, continuing education, plus many additional perks. Join the Terraces at Seacrest Village's quality healthcare community today. That's the Seacrest Village Job Fair this Wednesday, October 10th at Seacrest Village from 8 till 5, where you can apply for nursing, dietary, activities, housekeeping, and maintenance positions on the spot. Seacrest Village, 1001 Center Street in Little Lake Harbor. Call 609-296-9292 for more information. That's 609-296-9292. Or visit SeacrestVillageNJ.com. That's 609-296-9292. Or visit SeacrestVillageNJ.com.
This flu season, one Walgreens flu shot can make a world of difference. So you can protect yourself and also your close-talking coworkers, high-fiving neighbors, 2-month-old niece. That's why Walgreens has specially trained pharmacists that have provided over 60 million flu shots since 2010. Stop by for your flu shot today with a $0 copay with most insurance. Because protecting the world starts with protecting yours. Walgreens. Trusted since 1901. Vaccine subject to availability. State, age, and health-related restrictions may apply.
So here's a story that may sound familiar. I used to post to several job boards, only to be overwhelmed with tons of the wrong resumes.
And because there were so many resumes,
it was tough to separate the great candidates from those who weren't the best fit. I mean, it's not easy to find the right person for
my wineries,
my sports medicine business,
our global PR agencies.
That old process was definitely
not smart. Then I went to ZipRecruiter. They figured out hiring.
ZipRecruiter did the work for me. Their powerful matching technology scanned thousands of resumes to identify people with the right skills, education, and experience for my job.
And actively invited them to apply.
So I got qualified candidates fast. Smart.
See why ZipRecruiter is rated #1 by employers in the U.S. Try ZipRecruiter now for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free. Once again, ZipRecruiter.com/free. ZipRecruiter. The smartest way to hire. Based on Trustpilot rating of hiring sites with over 1,000 reviews.
This is Pleasantville's talk station. WPG Talk Radio 104.1 and WPGTalkRadio.com.
We continue with Chuck Malamut. Kirk Conover, have a great day, sir. Thank you for your participation. Chuck, I know you mentioned third quarter earnings. Anything more?
Yeah, so when you look at third quarter, they're going to come fast and furious as we get to the end of the week.
Shouldn't they be really good?
Yeah, I mean, all signs are the earnings should remain positive, but may slow somewhat as we start announcing third quarter. Current third quarter earnings growth estimates are just under 20%. We had back-to-back quarters of earnings of 25% increases year over year. The lower estimates, going from 25 to 20 is still pretty significant, but the concerns about higher costs, stronger dollar, and obviously trade tension. So those are sort of the three big items, within third quarter. But we'll know, Harry, we'll know within the next 2 weeks where we are. That's for sure.
Chuck, in honor of the amazing Kreskin appearing with your little brother, Pocket Kreskin, this Friday at 9:35, right after Dr. Sebastian Gorka, former Trump senior official and a great Just a great, great person. In honor of the amazing Kreskin appearing on Friday, I'm going to ask you to channel your inner pocket Kreskin and tell us about the future of stock prices. How's that for a dynamic question? That's not easy. It's not even fair.
Yeah, it's pretty good, Harry. So we think that the prices will continue to rise. U.S. economic growth is obviously a big concern. We've talked about earnings. We've talked about what's happening globally speaking. So there's a lot of issues, political uncertainties, and especially here in the U.S. and China and Europe. I mean, emerging markets have taken it on the chin somewhat this year. So we think that all in all, stock prices will continue to move onward in a positive direction. But Harry, I think it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle, and earnings growth is obviously, very, very important as we look into the future. So I'm going to say modest returns probably as we get into the latter part of this year and the beginning of 2019. But remember, one of the things we kind of chatted about, if we go back historically and look at some data points, the fourth quarter is very, very critical, in as far as the U.S. equity markets are concerned. If we go back and look over the last 25 years, the S&P has gained on average about 5% over the last 3 months, October, November, December. And obviously, we've not gotten off to a great start, so far in October. And actually, 80% of the time, or 20 of the 25 past fourth quarters, have produced, a total positive return gain over that time period. So you think about, average gain of 5%, 80% of the time a positive gain. So we need to work through, the 10-year where it is now. We need to really clearly understand earnings. And, the market oftentimes is sort of like a rubber band. You're pulling that elastic and pulling that, and what happens? I mean, sometimes it gets strained. It gets strained a little bit. So I think
loses that ability to snap back.
Yeah, and I think where we're at right now is just sort of at a resting point where you think about a lot of hot money oftentimes chases stocks, and last in, first out in philosophy. So
you also don't want to lose the game in the fourth quarter either. It's you can lose your year in the fourth quarter.
Yes, you don't want to lose that game. And it was a team about 120 miles north of here that unfortunately had. That was incredible how they lost that game. But in any case, you don't want to give up. All the gains have been put in. So far with again the Nasdaq, the clear winner up 13%, S&P up 9.5%, and Dow up about 8.8%. But I think what's happening again, you're seeing that shift from growth to value, which we think is is pretty significant in the markets. And the fact of the matter is, obviously, I think we're going to finish up, relatively strong, and I think we're going to have some pretty good news coming out of the third quarter.
Chuck, in this generation, it seems like, and maybe it's always been this way, but the Dow is always the big, the A-list celebrity, the A-list movie actor, and some of the other indices don't get their due. How impactful is the S&P 500?
So, the S&P 500, you think about it, is really the market barometer. And I think, wouldn't it be nice if the media and the financial news networks and all of us, that work in the industry just, I don't say you get rid of the Dow. You can't do that. But the Dow is
overrated.
The Dow is 30 stocks. I mean, the S&P 500 market capitalization on 500 stocks, that represents 80% of the total market capitalization of all U.S. stocks.
But so many people pay attention to the Dow.
And think about yesterday.
It is the biggest number after all. It's more points.
Think about yesterday, for instance. The Dow was up. It fought, all day long, and I think it was up maybe 40 at the end of the day. The Nasdaq was down maybe 40 to 50, and the S&P was relatively flat. It was down a point. Yeah. So you did have somewhat of divergence, but if you take a couple Dow stocks, they can be very impactful with the results of that index at any given point in time. So I think, this sort of solidifies it. Think about this, Harry. 80% of the total market capitalization of all of the U.S. stocks at the end of the third quarter were represented within the S&P 500. I mean, so don't you think that we should really be watching the S&P 500 more closely, or that should be the number one indicator, not the Dow? I think that's the point that we were trying to make here.
And now I totally agree. Now let's go to the size and scope of the U.S. bond market.
We talked about, for more than one occasion this morning, the 10-year. And I think that, I think your listeners will be very, very surprised, when they hear that the U.S. bond market right now is about $42 trillion. I mean, think about that, Harry. That's governments and corporates. All right. The size of the U.S. stock market is $32 trillion. The size of our economy is $20 trillion, and the size of the Chinese economy is $12 trillion. So think about how impactful the bond market is, and I think that's what we're seeing now in the fact that when rates moved so quickly last week, that the stock market's kind of playing a little bit of catch up. Who's right? Is it the bond market, or is it the stock market? But I think so. Now what's happened is as we went through 3.2 to 320, 3.23, stock market doesn't like that, obviously, and as a result of that has had some sell-offs as a result.
The Small Business Optimism Index.
Yeah. So when you and Kirk kind of talked about this, we've talked about this before. The Small Business Optimism Index is a monthly measurement. It's been out for 45 years. And this is, Harry, what I'm about to tell you is it's nothing short of incredible. It reached its highest level ever in August 2018. Wow. And that index is based upon small business owners' expectations on hiring, business growth, and profitability. When do you think the previous record was set? How many years ago?
Well, I always default to the Reagan years, so I would go to the 80s, but I don't know if that...
Stop. July 1983.
Okay.
I mean, if you think about it, so it's 35 years we finally get through that number.
Because you've been around, Chuck, and you paid a lot of attention even when you were a senior executive in the casino industry, a lot of things that are happening now seem very analogous to the Reagan years, but some things are different, though, because interest rates were very high when Reagan took over. Tax rates were very, very high. So it took several years into that era for things to turn around. But do you find that this is similar to that?
Well, Harry, I think that if you look at interest rates exclusively, they are significantly different. And the fact of the matter is that, it took us a long time to dig out of the hole that was created back in 2008 and 2009, and that's were rates too low for too long? That's always going to be the question. I think there are some fundamental issues that are the same, but I think there's still a lot of differences.
I think that the truth is that rates were too low for too long, but there was just not the appetite to pull the trigger because it was too unsteady. Remember how many times it looked like we were going to see a rate increase, but then there would be a hiccup, and then it wouldn't happen. And now, of course, it's undeniable how strong the economy has been the past several years. So now we're in this sort of, I think, warp speed rate increase.
Yeah,
I think they've gone too fast.
I agree with you. I think that sometimes, that you need to maybe take a step back, and that's why what we're seeing now is all the projections, and it's kind of counterintuitive to your thinking. But
I'll tell you what I would have loved, Chuck. If you don't raise interest rates for 10 years, I would have liked them to have taken 4 years to get to where they're going to get in 2 years.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, Harry, but think about, all eyes are on the economy. So, when the tax cuts were put in the beginning of the year or end of last year, that's going to obviously have a positive impact on the economy. So sometimes the Fed, does have to play a little bit of catch up, so to speak. But I am so focused on what their next move is. Are they going to, think about it. We had so many discussions about the yield curve being inverted. And the fact of the matter is, an inverted yield curve ultimately points out to a recession. Recession is two consecutive down quarters. But if you look at what's happening with the 10 and the the 10 and the 30-year bond, they're sort of moving in concert with respect to short rates. So the curve, while the curve is flat or flattish, it's not inverted, especially think about it, when the Fed made a 25 basis point move and then the 10-year right behind it, moves 20 basis points within a week, what's that do to the yield curve? Yeah. So, I think the pundits are saying we're going to have a recession. I don't, indicating by the yield curve inversion, there's no yield curve inversion at this point in time.
And until like last week or so, nobody even thought about the R word. We were talking about the Fed chairman saying there's no reason this can't continue forever. And this is going to be, the way that it can be. Chuck, what month did you mention when you went back to the year 1983? Did you
July.
July. We looked up, Kirk and I, September of 1983, 1.3 million jobs were created in 1 month.
Yeah, that's remarkable. So, you think of, so we're talking a little bit about the economy and, all eyes on the Fed and how important the economy is. And, right now, Harry, only 12% of Americans that were recently surveyed in early September, thought the economy was the most important problem, facing our country today. In other words, government deficits, jobless rates, inflation, trade, taxes. You roll that clock back to February 2009, right? When did the market make its lows? March 6th, right?
Yeah, 666.
Okay. In February 2009, 86% of Americans surveyed thought that the most important issue at hand, problem that we had, was the economy.
Well, yeah, when it's terrible, it's number one on your mind. When it's the best it's ever been, it's not. That's human nature, I think.
So in spite of everything that's reported and everything that's out there, the fact of the matter is that most Americans aren't terribly concerned right now about where we are with the economy.
So how about this? And you're doing it in so many words, but I'll pin it down. The Great Recession, we'll go back a decade to 10 years later. What do you have to say about the economy?
Well, take a look at the stock market gains, over 400+% over that time period. I mean, think about, Harry, the people that just couldn't take it anymore and basically said, I'm out and I'm never coming back. I mean, and I saw a stat the other day. It was either 9 or 12% of people that liquidated assets back in 2009 never came back to the markets. The fact of the matter is that, we continue to live and work through the longest bull market in history.
I know.
So when you have the kinds of days that we've had of late, and it's not unusual, there's a number of news items that will, economic reports, economic stats that are going to create, the market to do what it does. I mean, and again, this is something I say it a lot. I said, Harry, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Whether your entry point is today, tomorrow, the next day, you need to give this, 5, 10, 15, 20 years if you really want to be a quote a successful investor.
And in most cases, that's what people are doing. They're setting up for retirement, and it's, as you say, it's not a sprint. So don't sweat today and the end of next week. And really, if you're in it for the long haul, then really the track record of how things have performed for so many years should just be comforting.
And speaking of retirement, I found this to be very, very interesting. Right now, Harry, 60% of American workers have some sort of an access to an employee-sponsored, defined contribution, a 401k plan. 26% of Americans right now have access to a defined benefit pension plan. So the mechanisms are there to save. Oftentimes, most companies that are successful, have an employer match. So, you think about it. You make your contributions. Company matches 50% of the first 6, so it's literally 3% of your pay. A 5-year vesting schedule based on date of hire. Employers trying to encourage long-term employment. Think about if somebody's going to put in 4% of your pay. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's that? Anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks of pay.
without affecting your net paycheck.
Right. I mean, so
you're not. I mean, it's silly not to participate.
And oftentimes what we hear, when you think about the problems that we were faced with 2009, where a lot of companies either suspended or eliminated the match, and the employees would throw up their hands and say, "Well, I'm not going to contribute anymore. The employer's not going to do anything." And we would say, "Well, that's kind of borderline insanity because you need this money on the back end when it's time for you to retire."
Yeah,
I mean, what you're quote getting even because your employer's not going to match your contribution
you're
anymore?
penalizing yourself.
Absolutely.
Which just doesn't make any sense. Chuck, when you do your analysis so very, very well, and we talk about things like if we had 2 quarters with no growth, it would be a recession. We would recognize that as a national recession. What about states? I mean, for example, we might have a situation where there's not a recession that's acknowledged nationally, but you could have individual states in a recession or even a Great Recession. I mean, let's be parochial. We suffered the Great Recession much longer than many states right here in this area.
I will disagree with you a little bit there because I think we, the state of New Jersey, southern New Jersey, with the way the laws were written, we were a little slow to get started with all these foreclosures. You think about.
So you don't think it was more severe? It was just we were late.
I think what would happen was if you take a look at Nevada, Florida, Texas, for instance, I mean basically out of the gate, they were rolling through these foreclosures, and I think
ours were piling up.
I think it took us longer to quote get started, and now as a result, we're sort of coming out on the back end, but these other states, seem on the surface to be more profitable.
I'm going to concede that point, but let me break it down a little further. On top of the fact that we had the highest home foreclosure rate in America, highest unemployment rate in America, with 4 casinos closing, and we hemorrhaged tens of thousands of jobs, I think we did have a deeper and longer recession than most areas.
Well, and the other thing to consider is the fact that as it doesn't come to any surprise to you and your listeners. I mean, this is certainly not a tax-friendly state, and is not a user-friendly state. So, what has been created here is the fact that it's just very, very hard to sort of get ahead. Now, this I find very, very interesting. One of the questions you asked, and we kind of got sidetracked here for a minute. Basically, 60% of the states that are out there right now, Harry, do not have sufficient reserves set aside to absorb a financial impact, like an economic recession, as an example. So what's going to happen? Will force them to raise taxes, raise fees, or reduce benefits. So you think about where we are. We're obviously one of the 30. It's not too hard to figure that out. Can you imagine increasing our taxes because the state has done such a bad job running the business?
It's disgusting, actually. Here's a stat that I'm never going to forget. This is from our buddy Kirk Conover. Since 1933, the stock market has increased 57,000%. Best investment you can make. 57,000%, Chuck.
Oftentimes when we meet with 401k participants, and there's I'm not going to do a very good job describing this. We oftentimes revert to a chart. It's what we call a mountain chart. Imagine you start down in the bottom left with the 2 quadrants, the X and Y, and you sort of dot plot it, and then you compare inflation, short-term interest rates, or short-term rates on returns of owning short-term instruments, returns on owning longer-term government bonds, large company stocks, and then small/international. And it's just so amazing the divergence between when you look at that mountain chart and saying, "Oh my goodness!" Like if I can stay invested over my lifetime, and we say this, obviously to younger people, more to younger people than older people, then. I mean, Kirk's absolutely right. I mean, think about a 400+% return over the last decade. So if the market went down, Harry, 20%, I mean, you're going to feel some pain points. I mean, everyone's going to be upset. Our clients will not be particularly happy. But
you're still up 380%.
But I think you have to look at it. This is, again, are we in a sixth inning of a game that's going to go 12? Are we in a ninth inning at the top of the ninth that's going to end in the bottom of the ninth? I mean, that's anybody's guess, and that's what
So in other words, unless you were at the very end of when you were going to retire, but even after you retire, you're still invested and you're still yielding.
When you are,
so there is no end.
When you're retired, no matter how old you are, you still need to have some equity exposure. Our recommendation, and a lot of your listeners will probably take offense to this, say we're suggesting like a 20% equity exposure.
Chuck, that's sobering and it's important to say. We hear different things. I want to get your take on it. With life expectancy being what it is, some people aren't even retiring, but if you want to retire, how many years do you need to be able to have the funds that you need in retirement?
Yeah, we have this wonderful tool that we use. It's called LifeView, and it takes all of the assets, the liabilities, the what ifs, one-time money leaving, money coming, and it automatically solves for mortality. The average male, 89. The average female, 93. Now, we have the ability to make those changes within the software that we, or the module that we use.
So
but
if you want to retire at 65,
yeah, you need to. And here's what's really scary.
25, 30 years.
60% of working age Americans, and that's defined 21 to 64 years old. So there's a pretty wide gap. Have not accumulated assets in any sort of retirement account, Harry. Whether that's a defined benefit plan, whether that's a defined contribution 401k account. I mean, that's just scary. That so many people are going to be so ill prepared for,
may live
a long time as a result of that.
And during years where your best income years won't be there, but yet you will still be here and be vital.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough. Rising interest rates, does this hurt equities?
Well, we think it does. I mean, it's you think about what we are living through right now. I think it's clearly evident that the equity markets are taking somewhat of a hit as a result of these rates rising. Are we going to go to 4% on the 10-year? Are we going to go to 5% on the 10-year? We don't think that's going to happen. But the fact is, if the cost of borrowing is 50 basis points higher now than it was, say, just where we were, 6 months, a year ago, it could, take its toll within the equity markets. There's no doubt about that.
Final question, and we'll get you out of here, Chuck. Real estate and what's happening.
Yeah, so we oftentimes talk about different parts of the country and how expensive it is, or where should you live, and to what what's best utilization of your dollars. So the cost to rent an apartment today, a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco, $3,400.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, the median rent for that same one-bedroom apartment in Omaha, Nebraska, $825. So where do you live? Do you live in San Francisco? Or do you live in Omaha? Now, the median rent today in Charlotte, $1,275. So you see three different extremes. A high, a middle, and then obviously a low.
Let me put something in, not to confuse it, but to just put total context into it, though. But the economies of scale, though, the wages are higher in areas and like New York and California, where the prices are higher, the wages are higher, correct?
Absolutely, but I think you get to the point.
So is it relative?
Well, I don't know if it's so relative, because
I say save your money there and then take it to a place that's more affordable.
You think about how expensive it is to live, and it all gets down to what percentage of your income do you need to use for housing. And I think if you did those calculations, higher percentage in San Francisco, lower percentage in Omaha, Nebraska.
Chuck, fascinating hour. Appreciate it.
Harry, thanks for having me. See you next week.
Look forward to it. For all your financial planning needs, turn to the Malamut Group. Chuck Malamut and his team. Morgan Stanley, Northfield, New Jersey office, 609-383-2010. That's for all of your financial planning needs, retirement planning, college planning for your children, vacation planning, anything that you are saving towards. Chuck can sit down with you and put a great plan together. Programming note, Thursday, 9:05, Diamond and Silk in their first ever Hurley in the Morning appearance. Friday, quite a day. Gary Aldrich at 8. We're moving his time. Dr. Sebastian Gorka at 9:05, and the amazing Kreskin at 9:35. Open forum.
WPGG Atlantic City, WENJ 97.3 HD3 Millville. Everything you need to know in 6 minutes starts now.
But yet the phone lines are down. We'll be back.
Florida Panhandle is about to take a beating. I'm Dave Anthony, Fox News.
Hurricane Michael is a monstrous storm, and the forecast keeps getting more dangerous, and we're now just 12 hours away from seeing impact.
That's Governor Rick Scott says this could be the most destructive storm to hit that area in decades. Fox's Evan Brown monitoring live from Miami.
Yeah, Dave, Hurricane Michael will be devastating to parts of Florida's Panhandle. Storm surge is expected to reach 12 feet in some areas. Governor Rick Scott is